Nobody talked about the dragon. That was the first thing Bryn Tass noticed when he arrived at Outpost Varan 9. Not the smell of recycled air, not the low hum of the station's old generators, not even the fact that half the ceiling panels in the docking corridor were the wrong color, replaced at different times over different years. He noticed that a small creature was sitting in the corner of the cargo bay, carefully folding a human jacket with its clawed hands, and not a single person walking past even looked at it. Bryn stopped. The crew members behind him parted around him like water around a rock and kept moving. Someone bumped his shoulder. He did not move. The creature was small, maybe the size of a large dog, but built differently, lower to the ground, with a long neck and a tail that curled around its body when it sat still. Its scales were a dull silver blue, the kind of color that might have once been bright. It had two small curved horns, amber eyes, and it was holding a jacket the way something holds a thing it is afraid to damage. Gentle, careful, like it mattered more than anything else in the room. The jacket was clearly human-made, gray fabric, worn at the elbows. The kind of jacket an engineer wears on a cold station when the heating is unreliable. It had a small patch on the left shoulder, mostly faded, and a chest pocket that had been repaired with slightly different thread. The creature finished folding it, set it down, and then sat on top of it. Just sat there, watching the wall. Bryn turned to the nearest crew member, a tall woman with short red hair who was moving past him with a cargo scanner in her hand. "Hey, what is that?" She glanced over without slowing down. "That's Rilo." "What's a Rilo?" "The little dragon thing." "I can see that. Why is it? Why is he sitting on a jacket?" She finally slowed. She looked at Bryn with the expression of someone who has had a long day and expects more of them. "He just does," she said. "Don't touch the jacket." She walked away. Bryn looked back at Rilo. Rilo was now looking at Bryn. His amber eyes were calm and steady and entirely unreadable. After a moment, he looked away again. Warden Solar Dreth gave Bryn the orientation an hour later. Dreth was tall even by Chivari standards, which meant she had to angle her head slightly whenever they passed through a doorway. She spoke in careful, precise standard, and she moved through the station like she had memorized every corner of it, which she probably had. She showed him the crew quarters, the comms room, the engineering bay, the medical station. She explained the rotation schedule, the emergency protocols, the policy on personal equipment storage. She did not mention the dragon until Bryn asked. "The creature in the cargo bay," he said. "Rilo." Dreth stopped walking. She turned to look at him. "Yes." "What is he? Why is he here?" "He is a Dravel juvenile. He has been at this station for approximately 9 months. She paused. "He is not a pet. He is not a mascot. He is not here for crew morale or any official purpose. He simply has not left." "Can't he leave?" "He is not confined." Another pause, longer this time. "He does not want to." Bryn waited because it was clear there was more. Dreth looked at the middle distance for a moment, then said, "Do not touch the jacket. It is his, and it matters to him, and there is no version of taking it or moving it that ends well for anyone." She turned and kept walking. Bryn followed. He did not ask anything else for the rest of the orientation. That night, he could not sleep. The bunk was fine. The station noise was no worse than any other posting he had been on. He lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and thought about the jacket, about the way Rilo had folded it, about the patch on the shoulder and the repaired pocket and the worn elbows. Someone had worn that jacket a long time, someone who worked with their arms, someone who ran cold. After a while, Bryn got up and walked to the cargo bay. Rilo was there. He had moved from where Bryn had seen him earlier. He was now at the far end of the bay, near the wide observation window that looked out into the debris field, a slow drift of broken rock and old metal that orbited the binary stars like a wound that never healed. The station lights were down to their night setting. The stars outside were very clear. Rilo was curled around the jacket. He was not asleep. His eyes were open, and he was looking out the window at the debris field, still and quiet, his tail moving very slowly back and forth. Bryn stood in the doorway and watched him for a long time. He did not know what he was looking at yet. He did not know about Gray Harlan or the EVA accident or the paperwork that had never been completed. He did not know any of it. He just knew that the creature by the window was looking at something that was not there anymore. He said it very quietly, not expecting an answer, not really speaking to anyone. He said, "What happened to you, little guy?" Rilo did not turn around. Outside, the debris field drifted in silence, the way it had every night for 6 months. The old crew logs were stored in a cabinet in the comms room that nobody locked, because nobody thought anything important was in there. Bryn found them on his 3rd day at Varan 9, during a quiet hour when the comms board was calm and he had nothing to do but sit and think. He was not looking for anything specific. He just kept thinking about Rilo and about the jacket and about the way Dreth had gone quiet when he asked, like the answer was too large to fit neatly into a corridor conversation. So he looked. The logs went back 4 years. He skipped to 9 months ago, the approximate time Rilo had arrived, and he started reading. The first mention was short. A cargo manifest note, one Dravel juvenile, unclaimed, recovered from the wreckage of a colony transport. Destination unknown. Holding at Varan 9 pending transfer to a wildlife registry on the nearest inhabited station. Assigned to the care of one crew member, name listed as Gray Harlan, engineer, 2nd class. Gray Harlan, Bryn read the name twice, then kept going. The next few logs were maintenance reports, the usual kind. Then, about 2 weeks after Rilo's arrival, there was a personal crew note. The station used them for informal record keeping, the kind of thing a crew member filed when something happened that did not fit any official category. Gray had filed one. It said, "The little Dravel got out of the holding pen again. I have decided to stop locking it. He seems calmer when the door is open. He did not go anywhere, just sat outside the pen and looked at things. I sat with him for a while. He likes it when I talk, I think. Hard to tell, but his ears move when I do." Bryn read it again, then he kept going. There were more notes, not many. Gray was not the kind of man who wrote long things, but there was a pattern in them if you read enough to see it. Week 3, heating unit in Bay 4 failed again. The Dravel was cold. I gave him my spare jacket. He carried it around for 2 hours before he sat on it. I don't think he's ever been warm before, not properly. Week 5, transfer request from the Wildlife Registry came back denied. They're at capacity. They'll contact us when there's a space. No timeline. I told the little one. He probably didn't understand, but I told him anyway. Week 8, I've been reading my maintenance manuals out loud when I work in the bay. He sits nearby. I don't know if he understands anything, but he seems to like the sound. He's put on some weight. His scales are brighter than when he got here. Week 11, I filed the adoption paperwork today. I know it takes a long time to process. I know I might get transferred before it comes through, but it felt wrong not to. He deserves to belong somewhere. That was the last personal note Gray Harlan had filed. 3 weeks later, there was an incident report. Brief and formal, the way incident reports always are, because nobody wants to write the long version of something terrible. Gray Harlan had been on EVA duty, a routine repair on the station's external sensor array. There had been a mechanical failure, the kind that happens very rarely and then is fixed, and then everyone agrees it should never happen again. He had been recovered, but not in time. He died on a Tuesday. The adoption paperwork was still pending. Nobody completed it. Bryn closed the log file and sat very still for a while. Then he went to find the video archive. He found what he was looking for after 20 minutes of searching. A corridor camera, interior, pointed at the cargo bay door, time-stamped from about 7 weeks into Gray's notes. 43 seconds of footage. Gray Harlan was sitting on a crate with a maintenance manual open on his knee. He was not a large man, average height. A bit broad in the shoulders, with the slightly tired look of someone who had been on a station posting for too long and knew it. He was reading aloud, moving his finger under the lines, and his voice was low enough that the camera pickup barely caught it. Rilo was curled up 3 feet away, watching him. His scales were bright in that footage, much brighter than they were now. He was leaning forward a little, his ear frills up, the way a dog leans toward a sound it is trying to understand. Gray reached the end of a section and paused. Without looking up from the manual, he reached out his hand. Rilo stretched his neck forward and pushed the top of his head against Gray's palm. Gray scratched behind his horns, still reading. Rilo's eyes went half-closed. 43 seconds, then the motion sensor cut the feed. Bryn sat with his hands flat on the desk for a long time. He thought about a man who read technical manuals out loud to a creature that didn't understand the words, just because the creature liked the sound. He thought about a jacket given away because something was cold. He thought about paperwork filed on behalf of someone who could not file it themselves, toward a future that got taken away before it arrived. He thought Gray Harlan never did anything grand, he just kept showing up. When Bryn went back to the cargo bay that evening, Rilo was in his usual spot. He had moved the jacket again, repositioned it precisely, the way he always did. He was offering it to the empty space beside him, that old familiar gesture, and then pulling it slowly back when nothing came. The scales on his chest were very dull in the low light. Bryn sat down on a crate across the bay and did not say anything. Rilo looked at him once, then looked away. They stayed like that for an hour, not close, not interacting, just present in the same room. It was a small thing, but Bryn was starting to understand that in this place, small things were the only things that had ever mattered. On the fourth day, Bryn left a piece of dried fruit near Rilo's corner of the cargo bay. He did not make a ceremony of it. He did not crouch down and hold it out with his hand. He simply set it on the floor, about 2 meters from where Rilo usually sat, and walked away. He came back an hour later to check, not obviously, just passing through on his way to engineering. The fruit was gone. On the 5th day, he left a second piece in the same spot, slightly closer, gone again. He did not try to interpret this, he just kept doing it. On the 6th day, he brought a warm cloth, not the jacket, nothing like the jacket, just a small piece of heated thermal wrap from the medical bay, the kind used for muscle aches. He set it down, he walked away. He came back and the cloth had been moved. Rilo had pushed it against the wall with one foot and left it there, not taken it, not used it, just relocated it, as if it was mildly irritating but not worth fighting about. Bryn counted that as progress. Warden Dreth caught him in the corridor on the 7th day. "You are spending a lot of time in the cargo bay," she said, not accusing, observing. "It's a nice cargo bay," Bryn said. Dreth looked at him with her large compound eyes, which made it difficult to tell exactly what she was thinking, which Bryn suspected was one of the reasons she never bothered hiding it. 3 crew members tried to befriend him in the first month after Gray died, she said. Cos brought him food every day for 2 weeks. Fennel tried to play with him. Yura simply sat near him for hours at a time and said nothing. Rilo tolerated all of them. He did not bond with any of them. "I know," Bryn said. "You know, and you are still doing it." "Yes." Dreth was quiet for a moment. Then, "I looked up Dravel bonding behavior after Gray died. There is not much written on it in standard, but there is enough. They bond rarely. It takes a long time. And when the bond is broken by death, there is a significant probability that it does not form again. Some of them simply," she paused, choosing the word carefully, they do not die quickly, but they stop being fully alive." Bryn thought about the footage, about the bright scales in that 43-second clip, about the dull, flat color of them now. "He's dimming," he said. "Yes." "How long has he been dimming?" "Since the week Gray died." Dreth looked at the floor, then back at Bryn. "I do not know if it can be reversed, but I do not think telling him that will help either of you." She walked away. Bryn stood in the corridor for a minute, then went back to the cargo bay. Rilo was in his spot, jacket folded under him, tail curled around himself. He watched Bryn enter without moving. His eyes were steady. They were always steady, and Bryn had started to find that steadiness harder to look at than obvious sadness would have been. Bryn sat down on his usual crate. He pulled out his reader. He opened the first maintenance manual he could find, which happened to be a 40-page document on atmospheric filtration systems for mid-sized orbital stations. He cleared his throat. He started reading out loud. His voice came out awkward, too loud at first, then too quiet. He stumbled over a technical term, backed up, tried again. He got the pronunciation wrong on a chemical compound and said it 3 different ways before giving up and moving on. He was a navigator, not an engineer. None of this was his area. He felt completely absurd. Rilo's ear frills moved. They moved very slightly, just a small shift of the thin membrane that framed the sides of his head, the way a cat's ears will turn toward a sound without the cat bothering to turn its head. Bryn saw it and kept reading. He did not react. He did not smile. He just turned the page and kept going. He read for an hour. His voice went dry and he had to stop for water. When he came back, Rilo was in the same position, but his neck was slightly extended, just slightly. His eyes were still on Bryn. Bryn kept reading. He came back the next evening, and the one after that. He finished the filtration manual and started one on hull integrity maintenance. He read through his breaks and during the slow hours on the comms board. He started keeping the reader in his jacket pocket so it was always available. He was on the 3rd evening of the hull integrity manual when he looked up and realized Rilo had moved. Not a lot, not dramatically. He was still on the same side of the cargo bay, still on his folded jacket, but he was approximately 1 meter closer to Bryn's crate than he had been on the first night, maybe less than a meter. Bryn was not entirely sure because he had not been measuring. He had specifically decided not to measure because measuring felt like it would jinx it, which was not a rational thought for a navigator to have, but was the thought he had. He looked back at his reader and kept reading. Rilo watched him with his amber eyes, unblinking, completely still. When Bryn's voice finally gave out and he had to stop for the night, he looked up and just looked at Rilo for a moment, not asking for anything, not trying to move closer himself, just looking. Rilo looked back. Then Rilo lowered his head onto the jacket, and his ear frills settled, and his tail moved once slowly and went still. Bryn put the reader away and went to his bunk. He lay in the dark and thought about Gray, who had done this first and not known what he was starting. Somewhere down the corridor, a small dragon slept on a jacket and breathed in and out, and outside the window, the debris field turned in the cold, and the stars did not move. The alarm was not a large emergency. That was the thing Bryn kept thinking about afterward, in the way people circle back to small facts when larger ones are too much to hold. It was not a large emergency. It was a grade 2 pressure irregularity in the cargo bay ventilation system, which triggered an automatic protocol, which in turn activated the bay's cleaning and intake fans as part of the station's standard response. It happened at 3:40 station time, when most of the crew was asleep. The noise woke Bryn before the alarm did. A deep mechanical shudder running through the walls, the particular sound of fans that were not usually active coming online at speed. He was on his feet before he was fully conscious, which was a habit you developed on stations, and he was already moving when the intercom crackled to life with Dreth's voice telling all crew to hold position and await assessment. He went to the cargo bay instead. The intake fans were in the far wall, behind a grated vent panel that was now fully open. The bay had pressurized a little, which pushed loose objects toward the walls, which meant a collection of lightweight items near the vent side of the room had migrated. A thermal blanket someone had left folded on a crate, a stack of cargo labels. A comm pad that had been sitting on the floor. And the jacket. Bryn saw it at the same moment Rilo did. The jacket had slid off its spot on the floor during the pressure shift and was now 3 meters from where it had been, very close to the intake vent, its gray fabric lifting and rippling in the airflow, moving toward the grate by small degrees. Rilo was on his feet. He was making a sound Bryn had never heard before, not loud, more like something pressed very hard against something else, a kind of vibration more than a noise. His claws were on the floor and he was frozen. He was small and the vent was large, and there was a metal grate between him and the fabric, but the spaces in the grate were wide enough. Bryn ran. He was across the bay before he had decided to move. He went down on his knees on the metal floor, shoved his arm through the grate before the sense to not do that could catch up with him, and caught the jacket with 2 fingers. The edge of the grate caught the back of his hand and opened it, a clean, sharp line across the knuckles. He did not feel it yet. He pulled the jacket back through, stood up, and turned around. Rilo was 3 feet behind him. He had crossed the bay without Bryn seeing it happen. His amber eyes were fixed on the jacket in Bryn's hands, and he was very still, the way things are still when they are deciding whether to panic or not. Bryn crouched down. He held the jacket out with both hands, carefully, the way he had seen Rilo fold it. Low and slow, no sudden movements. "Here," Bryn said. It was a dumb thing to say, since Rilo did not understand standard in any meaningful way, but it was the thing that came out. Rilo did not move for a moment. Then he stepped forward and put his nose against the jacket and breathed in, long and slow. His ear frills went flat, then relaxed. He breathed in again. Then he turned his nose to Bryn's bleeding hand and sniffed that too, and this time he didn't pull back. Then Rilo made a sound. It was low and resonant, and it came from somewhere deep in his chest. Not a growl, not a hiss, something between a purr and a dirge, a sound that had grief and something else wound together in it, a sound that pressed against the chest from the inside when you heard it. Bryn had never heard anything like it, and he was almost certain he would never forget it. He did not know what it meant yet. He just held very still and let it happen. Later he sat on the floor with his back against the wall and his hand wrapped in a cloth because Dreth had appeared at some point, assessed the cut, handed him a field dressing and left without saying much. Rilo was beside him, not in his lap, not pressed against him, just beside him. The jacket was between them, spread out flat on the floor, and Rilo had 1 foot resting lightly on the edge of it. They sat like that for a long time. The alarm had been cleared. The fans had returned to standard operation. The rest of the station was quiet. Dreth came back once. She stood in the doorway, looked at them, and left again. In the morning, she found Bryn in the crew kitchen and spoke to him quietly while he was trying to get the coffee dispenser to work. "You should know what that sound means," she said. "I assumed it was distress," Bryn said, "because of the jacket." "Partly, but only the beginning of it." She paused. "Among the Dravel, a name is not given by others. It is confirmed by the self. When a Dravel makes that particular sound near a person, it means they have decided that person is real to them, not a passing thing, not a presence in the room. Real, the way Grey was real." Bryn was quiet. The coffee dispenser made a noise. "What does that mean for him?" he finally asked. "It means you exist to him," Dreth said. "The way it sounds, that precisely." She moved toward the door, then stopped. "I have been on this station for 6 years. I have worked alongside 11 different human crew members in that time. I have found you, as a species, frequently baffling." A pause. "But I think Grey Harlan would have been glad it was a human who ran." She left. Bryn stood there with his coffee and thought about that for a while. When he went back to the cargo bay that evening, Rilo was awake and waiting. His scales in the light looked slightly different, not dramatically, just the faintest suggestion of something warmer underneath the silver, like a lamp behind a curtain, just barely visible. Bryn sat down. He opened his reader. He started reading out loud again. Rilo laid his head on the edge of the jacket, and outside the window the debris field turned, and the stars were very clear. The transport docked at Varan 9 on a grey Tuesday, which was meaningless because there were no real Tuesdays in deep space, just the station clock insisting on them. It was a small ship, privately chartered, carrying 3 Chivari trade officials and 1 passenger who had not been on the original manifest. That passenger was old, very old by any standard Bryn had yet encountered. He walked with a cane that had been adapted from what looked like a section of ship railing, and he moved slowly. But when he entered the cargo bay and his eyes found Rilo, he stopped moving entirely and went very still. His name, according to the docking record, was Elder Vesson. He was Dravel. He was much larger than Rilo. Where Rilo was juvenile and compact, Vesson was long-limbed and deliberate, with scales the deep color of charcoal that had turned faintly gold at the edges with age. His horns were longer and curved. His eyes, when they fixed on Rilo, were the same amber, but deeper. The way a river looks deeper than a pond, even if you cannot see the bottom. Rilo saw him and went absolutely rigid. Not afraid, something else. Something like recognition mixed with shame, the way a creature looks when it knows it has been found out. He pressed himself smaller over the jacket, his tail wound tight around his body. Vesin crossed the bay slowly and crouched down in front of him. He said something in Dravel, a series of low tones, rising at the end, and waited. Rilo made a very small sound in return, barely audible. Dreth, standing near Bryn in the doorway, translated in a low voice. He asked Rilo how he was. Rilo said, the equivalent of still here. It is not a positive response in their language. It means surviving without meaning to. Bryn watched Vesin examine Rilo without touching him. The elder's eyes went to the jacket. He studied it for a long time. His expression, as much as Bryn could read it, shifted into something careful and heavy. He stood and turned to Dreth and spoke in Standard. How long has he carried this? 6 months, Dreth said, since the death of the crew member who owned it. Vesin nodded slowly, and this crew member, he was bonded to the young one. He did not know the word for it, but yes. They never do. Vesin looked at the jacket again. Among our kind, scent is not merely identification, it is memory made physical. To carry the object of a lost bond is to carry the person. Not from confusion, the young one knows the human is gone. He has always known. He paused. He carries it because to set it down would mean releasing him entirely, and he is not ready. Nobody said anything for a moment. Will he ever be ready? Bryn asked. Vesin looked at Bryn with his old amber eyes. He seemed to take him in properly for the first time, and whatever he saw made him thoughtful. How long have you been here? He asked. About 3 weeks. And you have been spending time with him. It was not a question, but Bryn answered it. Yes. He tolerates you. I think it's a little more than tolerance now, maybe. Vesin looked back at Rilo. Rilo was watching Bryn with his ear frills slightly up, the small unconscious attention he gave Bryn now whenever Bryn was in the room. Vesin was quiet for a while, watching this. Then he crossed to the station's small records terminal and asked Dreth to open the census file he had come to update. Dreth opened it. The entry for Rilo read, Dravel juvenile, unclaimed, status pending. Vesin typed a correction. It took him a moment because the keyboard was designed for smaller hands. When he was done, the status read, bonded, status, stable. He is not stable, Bryn said quietly, because the scales were still dull, and Rilo still ate too little. And there were still nights when he pressed himself against the observation window and stared at the debris field until the station lights came up. Not yet, Vesin agreed, but the direction has changed. There is a difference between a thing moving toward its end and a thing that has stopped and is considering whether to turn around. He picked up his cane. The scales do not lie. He is still dim, but he was dimmer 3 weeks ago than he is today. I can see it. Bryn looked at Rilo, trying to see what the elder saw. Vesin moved toward the door, then stopped. He spoke without turning around. In our tongue we have a phrase for this. It does not translate well, but the meaning is, a bond does not grow where there was nothing. It grows in the soil of what came before. The grief is not the obstacle. The grief is what makes the ground ready. He paused. Tell him, the one you are becoming for this creature. Tell him the jacket does not have to mean only one thing. It can hold more than one person. It is large enough. He left. His footsteps faded down the corridor. Bryn stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then he walked into the cargo bay and sat down in his usual spot. He opened his reader out of habit, then closed it. Rilo looked at him. His ear frills moved. And then slowly, deliberately, the way something only happens when it has been decided somewhere deep and quiet, Rilo lifted his head and nudged the edge of the jacket with his nose. He pushed it sideways, just slightly, so that one corner of the folded fabric extended toward Bryn's side of the floor. He did not relinquish it. He did not let go. He shared it. Bryn reached out and set one hand lightly on the corner of the jacket. The fabric was warm from Rilo's body heat. He kept his hand there. He did not move it. Rilo made the low resonant sound again, softer this time, shorter. Then he settled his head back down, his eyes half closed, his breathing slow. His scales in the cargo bay light were not bright, but they were brighter than yesterday. Outside the window, the debris field turned in its slow orbit, and the stars beyond it were as countless and cold as they had always been, and none of that mattered at all. The transfer orders came on a morning when the coffee dispenser was broken again, which felt appropriate. Bryn read them at the comms board during a quiet hour when there was nothing moving in the sector and no traffic to manage. The orders were 2 paragraphs. His new posting was in the inner system. Better equipment, larger crew, half the radiation exposure. It was what he had asked for when he first put in for Varan 9, before he knew what Varan 9 was. Back when it had just been a name on a list of temporary postings he was trying to get through quickly. He closed the orders, he opened them again, he closed them again. He sat with his hands flat on the desk for a long time. Then he went to find the crew record system in the secondary admin room, the one with the old terminal that nobody used anymore because the newer one in Dreth's office was faster. He liked the old terminal. It did not rush you. He pulled up the file for Rilo. Gray's original adoption paperwork was still in the system, still marked as incomplete, still waiting in the queue behind a status that read pending registrant confirmation. Nobody had touched it in 6 months. It had just sat there in the system, half-finished, like a sentence someone had started and then been interrupted before they could end it. Bryn completed it. He filled in the fields that Gray had left empty, the registration date, the confirming officer, the contact information. Where the form asked for the name of the registering party, he typed his own name. Where it asked for the station of record, he typed Varan 9. Where it asked for any additional notes, he wrote, "This registration was initiated by Gray Harlan, engineer 2nd class, who understood before any of the rest of us what this creature needed. I am completing it on his behalf." That is all. He submitted it. Then he opened a second form. This one was a voluntary rotation extension request, crew-initiated. It required a stated reason and a duration. For duration, he typed, "Open-ended, pending review." For the stated reason, after thinking for a moment, he typed, "Mission continuity." He submitted that too. He thought about the phrase as he walked down to Dreth's office. Mission continuity. It was technically true. Rilo was a registered crew-adjacent presence now. Bryn was the named registrant. There was a continuity argument to be made. He knocked on Dreth's door. She was at her desk, reviewing cargo routing tables, and she looked up when he entered with the expression of someone who had been expecting this and was not sure what to do about it. "I submitted a rotation extension," Bryn said. "I saw it come through." Dreth set down her stylus. "I want to make sure you understand what you are doing." "I understand. Your career track delays by a minimum of 3 cycles, possibly more, if the inner system posting fills while you are here. Varan 9 is not a posting that advances anyone. It is where careers pause." "I know. You are doing this for a creature that cannot speak your language, cannot assist your work, cannot explain to you in any terms why it carries a dead man's jacket, cannot offer you anything that would appear on an evaluation form." Bryn thought about 43 seconds of video footage, a man reading a manual with one hand and scratching behind small horns with the other, ear frills turning toward a sound, bright scales in a bay light. "He doesn't need to explain it," Bryn said. Dreth looked at him for a long moment. Then she looked at the wall, which was her version of looking away. Then she looked back. "No," she said, "I suppose he does not." She picked up her stylus again. "The extension is approved. I will note on your record that it was crew-initiated for operational reasons. That is the most I can do for you." "That's enough," Bryn said. "Thank you." He went back to the cargo bay. Rilo was there, of course. He was always there, at his spot near the observation window, facing the debris field. But when Bryn came through the door, Rilo's head came up immediately. His ear frills rose. He watched Bryn cross the bay and sit down in his spot, and there was something alert in him, the way an animal is alert to small changes in routine, some quality of attention that was different from waiting. Bryn opened his reader, found the maintenance manual he had been working through, found his page. He started reading out loud. His voice had gotten better at it over the weeks. He stumbled less. He didn't back up as much over technical terms. It was still absurd, a navigator reading hull calibration protocols allowed to a dragon in a cargo bay at the edge of inhabited space. He had stopped finding it absurd some time ago and was not sure exactly when. Rilo crossed the bay and lay down beside him, not 3 feet away, not 1 foot, beside him. His warm, scaled side pressed gently against Bryn's knee, and his head came to rest on the jacket, and the jacket was touching Bryn's boot. They stayed like that. Outside the window, the debris field moved through its slow orbit. Somewhere in it, spread across a wide area of broken metal and rock, were pieces of a sensor array and the record of an ordinary Tuesday that had gone wrong. Gray Harlan had never known, going out that morning, that he was leaving anything behind. He had never thought of the jacket. He had never thought of the paperwork. He had been going to fix something because it needed fixing, and after that he would have come back in and had coffee and read another manual out loud to a small dragon who liked the sound of his voice. He had just been showing up, the way he always did. Bryn turned a page and kept reading. Rilo's scales rose and fell with his breathing, steady and warm. They were not the bright silver blue of the old footage, not yet, but they were not the flat, dull color of the early weeks either. They were somewhere in between, moving slowly in the right direction, the way things move when they have decided to keep going. The jacket was between them, under Rilo's chin, warm from 2 bodies now. It had started as one man's way of saying you're cold and here is what I have. It had become a shrine. And then, without anyone planning it, it had become something else entirely, a shared place, a presence, a small proof that warmth does not end when the person who first gave it is gone. The reason, when it came down to it, was very simple. Rilo did not carry the jacket because he had forgotten Gray. He carried it because he had not, and because somewhere in that worn gray fabric, Gray Harlan was still, somehow, warm. And because, now, he was not the only one keeping him that way. Bryn read until his voice gave out. When he stopped, Rilo made the low resonant sound, brief and quiet, like a period at the end of a sentence. The stars outside did not move. The debris field turned. The station breathed. That was enough. It had always been enough.